In a world where so many people turn their faces away from the pain of others, a simple gesture can be all that's left and all that's enough. Have you ever imagined what can happen when a street boy, hungry, decides to share the only thing he has? This story will prove to you that hunger, a loneliness, and even the injustice can be overcome when someone has the courage to offer the little they have. Get ready to follow a storyline exciting, full of unexpected turns, invisible pains, and a reunion with what really matters. Because sometimes it's in the middle of the silent suffering that the greatest ones emerge miracles of life. And you won't believe what this abandoned old woman did after receiving a simple fruit. Luan was not just another street kid. He was one of those people the city ignores, the ones people look away from. At just 10 years old, his home was a concrete bench, and his roof was the sky full of broken promises. Every day, at the end of the market, he would pick up the leftover fruit, separating what he could still eat and what he could sell. Amidst overturned boxes and peels on the ground, he learned by himself that hunger doesn't wait, and that the streets, although cruel, teach you quickly. Despite the misery, there was something about Luan that set him apart, a sparkle in his eyes that not even the hunger erased. He had a habit of talking to fruits. He called bananas his twin sisters and spoke to avocados as if they were advisors. It may seem silly, but it was the way he found to escape the abandonment and of the loneliness. The street was hard, but imagination was his hiding place. And it was there, among dismantled tents and forgotten remains, that he discovered that the world could be more than rejection. Once, a street vendor saw Luan carefully wrapping a papaya in a piece of newspaper and asked, "Who is this feast for, chef?" He replied with a wry smile, "For myself, because even without a home, I deserve to eat with dignity." It was the logic of someone who had never known luxury, but knew the value of a piece of ripe fruit. In that terminal, where many only saw dirt, Luan cultivated hope, and little did he know he was about to experience a life change of those that nobody expected. On that sultry morning, the sky seemed to weigh down on the city. Luan was dragging a bag with some crushed fruit when he saw a scene that made him stop in the middle of the sidewalk. Sitting on the steps of an old church, an elderly lady, hunched over as if her body could no longer support the weight of her own history, was coughing persistently. Her skin was pale, her grey hair fell over her shoulders, and her eyes, even downcast, said it all. Invisible pain, silent suffering. Teresa didn't ask for anything. She didn't reach out. She didn't call attention to herself. She didn't make any noise. But there was something about that fragile figure that Luan recognized. It was the same kind of abandonment he saw in the reflection of the dirty windows of the terminal. That lady was an abandoned old woman, and the world seemed to have forgotten about her. The difference was that she, unlike him, no longer had the strength to walk, nor to look for remains. She was just there, waiting. She didn't even know what. And it's curious how the injustice, it shows up in the little things, right? A homeless boy with fruit in his bag, a lady with a house in the past, but no health in the present. Life put them both there, without announcement, without warning, with only the silence of the street as a witness. Luan, without thinking much, sat down 2 steps away. He didn't say anything. He just watched. And at that moment, something was born between them that had no name yet. Luan rummaged through the bag as if he were looking for a solution, not a snack. There was only one orange, a little crushed, but still sweet. The last one of the day, perhaps the only thing he would eat until the next morning. He looked at it, then at Teresa. His stomach was growling, his body was aching, but his heart felt heavier. And that was when, with that awkward little gesture, he held out the fruit with both hands and said, "It's all I have, but it's from the heart." Teresa took a while to react, as if she didn't believe that a street boy, one of the most vulnerable of the invisible, was offering her everything he had. She took the orange with trembling fingers, her eyes welling up with tears. Her voice came out almost like a whisper. "Thank you, my son. No one does that anymore." There, between the cracked concrete and the sun burning the sidewalk, something happened. Gesture of kindness that would be impossible to forget. It was small, but it carried a world inside. It's funny how the world turns, isn't it? Sometimes those who have almost nothing are the ones who know the most to divide. Luan didn't know it, but that orange was more than a snack. It was a bridge, a link between two broken souls, united by hunger, yes, but mainly because of lost hope, an unshakable faith that there was still something good to come, and that one unexpected miracle, born from such a simple act, was just beginning. Night fell with that heavy silence of a big city that pretends not to see suffering. Luan and Teresa sat down again on the church steps, sharing time, the cold, and now also conversation. For the first time in days, she opened up. In a low voice, between coughs and long pauses, she said that she had been nurse for 40 years, helped save lives, took care of crying babies, of forgotten veterans, of single mothers without anyone. But ironically, when she was the one who needed it, no one was around. Teresa had lost her husband in an accident, her only son to drugs, and little by little, she saw her salary, her house, and her health disappear. "Life is slowly pulling the rug out from under you, you know, Luan," she said, her eyes fixed on the floor. And the boy, although so young, understood, because he also knew the taste of rejection, a freezer-do abandonment, and the noise of an empty stomach trying to talk to the heart. They were from different generations, but with the same scars. She ended by saying, "It's not the illness that hurts the most. It's this feeling of being forgotten, of having nowhere to go back to." That sentence struck Luan deeply. It was like hearing the street talking. And there, under the stars, the two of them remained silent, as if silence were also a language of someone who has lost almost everything, but still holds within them a hidden desire to start over. And what they didn't know is that their start was already underway. Teresa spent the night awake, but not because of the cough. It was the thought that gave her no respite. The image of that street boy smiling as she shared a simple orange kept going through her head. She had seen a lot in hospital hallways, hunger, injustice, until hidden prejudice, but I had never felt such a pure gesture coming from so little. Something there awakened a forgotten strength, a purpose that time, pain, and old age had almost erased. She remembered the days when she was part of a support group linked to a community shelter. She no longer had a phone number and she couldn't remember everyone's names, but she knew where to start looking. The next morning, with shaky legs, she walked to a health center that was still operating amidst bureaucracy and neglect. There, she ran into an old co-worker who barely recognized her. "Teresa, I thought you had disappeared." The answer came back firmly. "I almost disappeared, but I met someone who made me want to come back." Teresa didn't know how or how far she could go, but she knew she couldn't let that boy continue alone. Luan had something special, a glow that not even the street could dim. She understood that if the world couldn't see him, it was up to her to be the eyes, because sometimes it's precisely at the moment when we think we've all is lost, which appears a sign of God. And that sign, that week, went by a short name and a wide smile, Luan. The following week, Teresa returned to the place she knew well, the old community nursing home in the back of the neighborhood, where she had spent entire shifts caring for elderly people without families. The gate was rusty, the walls peeling, but the shelter still lived there. She was greeted with a tight hug by Mrs. Zuleika, the coordinator. "It's been a while, huh, Tay?" Teresa took a deep breath and said, "I need a place to live, not just for myself, but for a special boy." And that's when everything really started to change. The place was simple, with makeshift beds and weak coffee, but there was human warmth. Luan arrived suspicious, accustomed to the streets, to the makeshift home each night. But when he saw a mattress all to himself and a folded towel with his name handwritten on it, he fell silent. For the first time in a long time, he didn't have to sleep hugging the bag of fruit. He slept hugging hope, a feeling he couldn't even remember anymore. "You now have somewhere to return to," said Teresa. While many think that luxury and misery are opposite extremes, Luan discovered that true luxury was a place with a pillow, a door that closes and someone waiting inside. The shelter, even if modest, was the new beginning he never knew how to ask for. And in the heart of that woman, who had already seen the world fall apart, the desire to do even more began to grow. Because when two wounded lives meet, sometimes the strength of a new beginning. Luan's first notebook was thin, with yellowed pages and a faded blue cover. He received it with a mixture of surprise and pride, as if he were holding a trophy in his hands. "I barely knew how to hold a pencil properly, but I memorized everything I heard." Teresa, even though her breathing was still short and her knees were weak, sat next to him every day and taught him his first words. A-E-I-O-U sounded like music. It was the sound of a life change that was beginning to take shape. Teresa was also changing. The previously quiet woman with no sparkle in her eyes began to take care of herself again. She started combing her hair and using cheap perfume that smelled like good memories. The simple act of teaching, of watching Luan grow up, worked like medicine. She looked in the mirror and saw a nurse again, not in uniform, but on a mission. The past was no longer a burden, but baggage. And there, in the nursing home, she began to recover something that seemed to have disappeared, the self-esteem. With each new word that Luan learned, the connection between them grew stronger. It was as if Teresa saw in him the son that life had taken away, and as if Luan saw in her the grandmother who had abandonment denied him. An unlikely duo, forged by chance and affection. While some still called them invisible, there in the pages of that notebook, a story was being written, real transformation. And like every good story, there would still come a twist that you won't believe it. Between readings and exercises, Teresa began to notice something that went beyond Luan's dedication. The boy didn't just learn quickly. He memorized everything. All he had to do was read a text once, and he would recite it by heart. "Did you memorize that?" she would ask, surprised. He would respond with a mischievous smile. "I think my head stores everything without asking for permission." Over time, Teresa understood. Luan had a rare intelligence, one of those hidden gems that street and hunger almost buried. Inspired by this talent and her own passion for books, she had an idea: to set up a library, but different. No fixed shelves and absolute silence. They wanted to bring books to those who needed them most. Lonely elderly people, rejected orphans, humble cleaning ladies during work breaks, and hungry children as Luan had once been. Thus was born Hope Station, a renovated cart that became a mobile library full of books donated by people in the community. They would go out to squares, fairs, and bus stops reading aloud. Luan loved to tell adventure stories with kings, castles, and dragons, but he made a point of saying at the end, "But the real hero could be you." People would stop, listen, and get emotional. It was more than just reading. It was a breath of fresh air in the midst of the rush. And it was with this simple initiative, born of a hidden talent and a generous heart, that they began to change the reality of those who had been forgotten. And the impact of that was just beginning. One hot afternoon, while Luan was reading The Little Prince to a group of ladies sitting at the bus stop, a man in a wrinkled shirt and a camera around his neck approached curiously. It was Claudio, a reporter for a local newspaper. He stood there listening to that street boy reciting like a soap opera actor. When he finished reading, there was spontaneous applause. Claudio approached and asked, "Who taught you that, boy?" Luan pointed to Teresa. "She was the one who taught me to see with the eyes of the heart." The next day, the headline came out, "Boy who reads to the elderly turns a bus stop into a classroom." The story went viral more than the newspaper itself expected. In just a few days, Estação Esperança gained followers on social media, book donations, and even volunteers wanting to help. Simple people, but with big hearts, began leaving boxes of books at the points where the cart passed. Some elderly people left little notes with requests. "Luan, can you read Drummond to me tomorrow?" It grew without pretense, but with soul. The city, accustomed to ignoring invisible boys and abandoned elderly women, I began to pay attention. The contrast between the luxury and misery, it was still blatant, but something was changing there, one gesture at a time. And while most were impressed by the boy's talent, few knew that what made it all possible was a simple and powerful thing: someone who believed. And when someone believes in you, the world starts listening to you too. What started with a cart and some donated books now took the form of a movement. Estação Esperança was no longer just a nice idea, it became a reference. Schools began inviting Luan to read at events. Book fairs asked for the storyteller boy to be present, and even local businesses began to support with food and materials. The community, previously apathetic, now found itself involved in a project that brought pride to the neighborhood. Then the biggest surprise arrived by email. An international NGO that works with education projects in underprivileged regions contacted them. They had read about the project in the newspaper and were moved. "A child teaching other children, that's too powerful to be confined to just one city," they wrote. The proposal was clear: to expand the Estação Esperança model to other Brazilian capitals. What's more, they wanted Luan and Teresa as ambassadors for the project. Luan's eyes widened when Teresa told him, "Do you want me to teach real people?" he asked, startled. She smiled. "You already do this every day, my son." It was unbelievable. A homeless boy who once shared a fruit with a lady now had in his hands the opportunity to change the destiny of hundreds of other lives. And this would be just the beginning of a journey greater than any of them ever dreamed. Time passed, but Luan's essence remained intact. The boy who once read stories in squares and shelters grew up, studied hard, and now went by the name of Professor Luan in the conversation circles he organized in the outskirts of the city. No more jackets, no diplomas hanging on the wall. His authority came from his experience, from the streets, from the hunger he felt, and from the lost hope that he knew how to find again. He was the living example that resilience, it is possible, even when everything conspires against it. With the support of the NGO and popular recognition, Luan created the project Living Roots, small learning centers scattered throughout forgotten regions, where young people, rejected orphans, desperate parents, humble cleaning ladies, and abandoned girls could learn and dream. The spaces were made in abandoned buildings, renovated with the help of the community. There, books shared space with art workshops, conversation circles, donated computers, and of course, stories. Lots of stories. He used to say, "Education is not just teaching people to read, it is reminding people that they are worth it." Luan became for others what Teresa had been for him, an angel in disguise, perhaps sent as part of a divine plan, which God uses to rewrite trajectories. And even in the face of so many challenges, he continued to have the same sparkle in his eyes. After all, true education is born from affection, and he never failed to provide that. Teresa now walked slowly, with the help of a charming cane that Luan had painted lilac, her favorite color. Her face still bore the marks of time, but her eyes had started to shine again. Her chronic cough no longer kept her up at night, and her easy smile had become a routine. More than cured, she felt alive again, an essential part of a transformation that had begun with asplit orange and had become a legacy of love and knowledge. She lived with Luan in a modest but lively little house. On the walls were photos of events, thank you notes from children, and even a frame with an old newspaper headline, "Boy who read to the elderly changes the city with books." She read it often, as if remembering a miracle. She always said, "God saw everything, my son. He saw your gesture and didn't let it go unnoticed." Because deep down she knew this was one of the miracles of life, small in the eyes of the world, giant for those who lived. At events, she was known as the grandmother of Estação Esperança. Everyone wanted to hear her tell how it all began, and she never held back on words or tears. She spoke of silent suffering, of invisible pain, but also of restart, of unshakable faith, and the unexpected help that life sometimes sends in the most unlikely format. Teresa knew she had bet everything on that boy, and in that silence full of meaning, the bet had become a mission accomplished. What was once a forgotten space, full of cracks and silences, was now reborn as a symbol of transformation. The old train station, where Luan sometimes slept hidden among benches and cash registers, had been renovated. It had become the Hope Station Cultural Center, a name chosen by the community. At the entrance, a sign with the phrase, "Here began a gesture that changed lives." It was the most unlikely endpoint for the journey of a street boy. On the day of the reopening, the colorful flags fluttered as if celebrating a collective victory. Children held hands with their grandparents, teachers, artists, former students, all gathered to watch Luan's first lecture in the new space. Wearing a simple shirt and with tears in his eyes, he took the stage. Next to the pulpit, sitting in the front row, was Teresa, wearing a flowery dress, carrying a lilac cane, and a smile that could light up the entire city. Luan began by saying, "I didn't come here to tell my story. I came to thank you for believing in it." He paused and looked at Teresa. "It all started when someone shared with me the most precious thing they had: time, attention, and faith." Applause echoed. It wasn't an end. It was the beginning of something bigger. The place where trains once passed by and left now welcomed lives that wanted to stay, grow, and start over. And all this because of a gesture that seemed small, but the ending will move you. How many times do we pass someone on the street and look away? How many stories like Luan and Teresa's go unnoticed simply because no one is willing to listen? Perhaps what is most lacking in the world is not money, but gestures, simple, real ones. Because what seems small, like sharing a piece of fruit, can light a flame that transforms lives. And you, what are you waiting for to be that point of light in someone's life? Have you ever thought about the impact that a gesture of yours can have? Comment below. What was the greatest act of generosity you have ever witnessed or experienced? Let's spread these stories as seeds of hope. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell so you don't miss any new stories, and share this video with someone who needs to believe in humanity again.